Yeah, we all are. A rogues gallery, if ever I saw one. Good morning to you all. Good afternoon in Europe, and a very early good morning to you, Tony, in the US.
Morning. Good afternoon.
Yeah, for some of us, the afternoon. So we've covered a huge amount of information so far this morning. There's a lot of questions already coming in. So we're going to get cracking straight away on some of the questions. Tony, in your session, you'll remember that you talked about automated fulfillment, micro fulfillment, etc. So do you think therefore I guess for omnichannel fulfillment, is that the direction of travel? Is that where all retailers are heading?
It's not where all retailers are headed, and it's going to vary quite a bit depending upon the type of product. Okay, so is it grocery? And if it's in grocery, is it frozen? Is it refrigerated, or is it ambient temperature grocery? And then, or if it's apparel, is it normal size apparel? And so it's going to vary. Is it electronics? So it's going to vary. And we've seen people doing micro fulfillment within a store, and then centralized fulfillment in a much larger facility. And we're seeing that kind of compete with other forms of automation, including locust type robots or each picking robots and goods to person robots. So we're seeing it move in that direction towards full automation, but I think it's a gradual evolution to that as people start becoming more familiar with the technology and understanding the pros and cons and the gaps or the weaknesses, let's say, where they can't handle certain types of items through that type of grid structure. So I hate to say that the answer really depends, but it's not a one size fits all solution.
So we'll probably continue to see different types of fulfillment, dark stores fulfilled from normal stores, etc., going forward.
Right. It's also, I've talked to a bunch of the companies and a bunch of customers, and some are looking for a much shorter payback. They're looking for a 6 to 12 month payback. Others are building new facilities and are looking at a 2-year payback. And so it kind of depends upon some of those economics also.
Yeah, and there's certainly that drive for speed as well. And obviously, if you build a great big fulfillment center in the middle of nowhere, it may be extremely efficient in itself. But if it's not close to physically to the customers, then that has a great impact on the speed of that service.
So you got exactly, Mark. You got to go back to what problem are you trying to solve? And part of it is I'm trying to solve a last mile delivery problem. Do I have the other pieces of my solution in place to meet customer expectations? Because if I build this great thing and I'm spitting out products and packaging them up, if I don't have the right delivery mechanisms in place, or I built this thing 30 miles away from where the end customer is, I haven't solved the whole problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so changing tack a little bit, Alexander, I've got a questions coming in around Amazon. We know that Amazon has opened up 2 frictionless stores in the UK already this year. They obviously have the Amazon Go frictionless stores in the US, and I believe there are other frictionless experiments happening across Europe. Are you seeing those sort of frictionless or staffless stores becoming more common?
Yes, certainly. So I think 6 months ago we had Tegut open their first staffless store, which is called Theo, and I think they have launched their 3rd store a month back. And I know that this kind of concept is being targeted or being developed by Edeka, Lidl, and Kaufland as well. So will they become more common? Probably yes, but I think they will only fit to one preference which customer has. So I think to line up to Tony, so we're also seeing an increase of grocery delivery and micro fulfillment centers, and maybe the frictionless store will be a combination of all that, so that you have micro fulfillment centers which only allowing click and collect, so online orders, and that you basically don't have to go inside anymore. I think the important thing is that you have to try these kind of things, this kind of new concepts, and see how the customers are responding in different countries to this, and then adapting it, changing it, and find the right way for your country, for your retail store, and for your market which you are serving.
Absolutely. Turning to David now, I've got questions coming in around out of your session. You talked about workforce scheduling and task management as part of the solutions. What about retailers simply looking at some of their more basic processes and turning them from paper into digital processes? Is that somewhere that Reflexis can also help?
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. So I think the beauty of a platform like Reflexis is there are lots of different jumping in points to that type of solution. So task management in itself can have a maturity curve of its own, starting from kind of very basic tasks coming from people in head office or on a repeating basis, right through to tasks that are being driven from prescriptive analytics data streams, or even being driven from sensing technologies in real time. Other more basic processes like checklists, for example, you know, as an ex-retailer, I know that we all love a checklist in a shop. Checklists can also be digitized in a solution like Reflexis. But to the point that Victor made, there's an efficiency benefit in doing that on a device, but really the benefit comes from the data you get back. It's really hard when you do checklists, audits, basic processes like that. You do them on paper, they sit in a ring binder in the manager's office for 6 months and they go in the bin. What have you actually, as an organization, what have you learned from that process? It's simply there as a check that you hope is happening to keep customers safe. So yes, absolutely, there's plenty of scope to digitize and simplify the more basic processes, but the value comes from the data that you're going to get from doing that, I think.
Yeah, and I guess that's very much, as you say, to Victor's point around having a data mindset. I guess the basic view is, should we or can we just digitize some of our existing processes? The other view is, what data could we gather through some of these processes, or changing the processes that actually helps us improve our business and improve the service to customers?
I have something I always say to prospective customers, Mark, and I'll share this with the group. When you take your existing process and you digitize it, you just end up with a really expensive old process. So what you want to do is, as you make these investments, you want to take the opportunity to think, actually, how by making this investment, how can we simplify the process? How can we optimize it? Or how can we find more value from the data that digitizing it actually brings to the business? Continuous improvement, closing the gap between knowledge and action is critical if you want to get into that age of agile engagement that we talked about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Alex, just a quick question coming back to you from the audience. We got Angela talking about she's seen that in the US, people like Target and others are using Zebra's devices for mobile payments, mobile point of sale, to try and take or change, I guess, the way people take payments in a retail store. Is that something that we see happening in the EMEA region?
I can only speak for my countries, of course, but yes, we do. And we having actually right now opportunities which are asking for these kind of solutions. And I think that is because the payment market itself, which has a lot of regulations, especially in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, is being eased up right now. And which was basically the hurdle for us when we have released, I think, our payment module a couple of years back. And I think once that has been done, those regulations disappear in all countries, I think we see that much more. And I think we all can thank Apple and Google and all these payment vendors, because they have paved the way for us, because their payment options basically has forced the governments or the institutions to to reduce the burden or the level in order to get into the market for new payment providers.
Yeah, that's a really good point around the legislation changes. I think the pandemic has also driven, I guess, or accelerated some of those changes. We saw at the beginning of last year the increase across the world of contactless payment limits, and which brought a lot more transactions into that sort of tap and go realm. And we even hear in the UK of the government proposing a £100 limit on contactless payments, which brings a lot more transactions into that space. And also the legislation around digital receipts, replacing or potentially replacing physical receipts, as well as the ability to use your PIN on glass or PIN on screen. So there seems to be a lot happening right now in that payment space, and we have a number of Zebra. We have a number of solutions coming up and hardware advances coming up that are around that. So certainly watch that space. So Tony, I want to come back to you because in your session you talked about robotics, you talked about shelf edge cameras, and I guess that shelf edge camera piece is intriguing to me, because Tom Bianculli earlier in the day had talked about the need to improve our visibility of inventory, particularly what's on stock on the shelves right now. And I guess computer vision, cameras, robots, etc., that's got to be part of the answer to that. Are you seeing the same from investment growth input into those sorts of companies?
Oh man, we're seeing there's a ton of money going into that space. So, and there's multiple ways to capture you. Once again, you have to start with what problem are you trying to solve? And that's the inventory visibility problem. And yeah, you could do it with somebody walking up and down an aisle with paper and pencil. Okay, and that kind of works. Or you could do it with a robot like a Zebra Smart Sight robot, or you could do it with shelf edge cameras, or you could, and some people are able to do it with ceiling cameras, although you have tougher visibility due to the angles. So there's a lot of ways to do it. What we're seeing, first of all, there's a lot of money being invested in that space. Zebra acquired Cortexica to get us a little bit more of that computer vision capability. And we invested in a company named Focal Systems that is focused on shelf edge cameras to give you that real-time inventory visibility. I'm watching the market. I'm watching where investors are putting their money, a lot of money going into that. But the question, I got to look at it on a bigger basis, I guess. You have that information coming in. The issue is, what can you do with the information you collected on the out of stock or the lack of planogram compliance? And that blends itself into Reflexes, Zebra's Reflexes solution, where there's task management. So it's great that I have that information, that I'm collecting information, but how do I turn it into value? And I only do that when I turn it into a task. So I've got to do the right analysis and have task management. So money flowing into this space, but we got to think of the outcome that we want. And that's less stockouts, that's planogram compliance, that's pricing compliance. The other piece of this market, sorry to give you such a long answer, but I'm watching some of the electronic shelf label companies looking at this, because there's some synergies between, if I'm putting cameras on a shelf and I have an electronic shelf label, I can do more things in helping potentially guide my pickers. If I have an Instacart picker or an in-store picker, I can start guiding them to stuff and giving them more information on the inventory that's available, where to pick it. If it's not available, is there some in the back? So those shelf edge cameras can contain some of that information. So I'm watching some convergence between a couple of different technology solutions, but both being used to solve a problem. And like I said, in concert with task management.
I think that's a really good point, Tony. And you talked about in concert with, and I think certainly from the conversations I had with retailers and looking and understanding some of the technologies that are available, the answer to in-store availability, the right stock, is a combination of things. There's no one solution, one product or technology that solves the whole thing. There is a combination of technologies, and some of it will be computer vision, some of it will be the tasks that we ask our staff to do, some of it will be the data piece, understanding where products are in the supply chain, and having a confidence level about what's been sold, what's not been sold, what's front of store, what's back of store. More traditional technologies like RFID certainly play a part in that as well. So I think you're absolutely right. There's a concert or some sort of harmony required in bringing those solutions together.
Well, you just brought up another piece of the puzzle, and I should have mentioned it. Shame on me. We invested in a company recently named FourKites. So when you talk about asset visibility, not only are people looking for asset visibility inside the store, but you have store managers looking for information on when they're going to receive a shipment. And that's one of the things that FourKites helps retailers to do, is know estimated time of arrival for goods. And we recently made the investment. I think we announced it about 6 weeks ago, and we've already seen a ton of customer interest in their solution and how it could work in concert with Zebra and even stuff like Reflexis.
Perfect. So talking about Reflexis, I'm going to go back to David now, and maybe pose you a slightly difficult or challenging question, because the Reflexis acquisition was only probably less than 6 months ago now, and we're already talking about how do these things, these different solutions, both Reflexis, the Cortexica piece, the Profitect prescriptive analytics, Workforce Connect, those working together. What's next? What's the next thing that is on your list of bringing those solutions together to improve the outcomes for retailers?
Thanks, Mark. So I think let's start with what we've delivered, right? So the first thing that we've done is we've integrated Reflexis and ZPA together. That's the first thing. So if you are an existing Reflexis customer, you've got the ability to add on the prescriptive analytics module and bring a whole extra dimension to your task management capability. So if you're using Reflexis today to manage simple basic tasks from head office to stores, repeating, etc., now you've got this incredible extra channel of opportunity to start having tasks intelligently triggered based on the data that you've got available in your business. And the great thing about prescriptive analytics is that data doesn't need to be in any particular format for us to process it. The solution's really flexible. So if you're sat here thinking, oh God, it will never work for us because our data's everywhere or it's not in great condition, hey, we're used to dealing with that. So that's been our priority. From a roadmap perspective, I think there's a few really interesting initiatives going on. So the first is where there are opportunities to bring these solutions closer together to improve the user experience. So how can we take some of the capability of Workforce Connect, for example, and use it alongside the QCOM messaging capability of Reflexis and vice versa? How can we take Smart Count, which is this best-in-class solution for stock counting and works brilliantly as a standalone capability, but weave it into the overall workflow? So I've got prescriptive analytics generating insights around inventory visibility. It says maybe I've got an out of stock. That action is surfaced in Reflexis, and my end point of activity is go and do an action in Smart Count to check that stock or count it. So over the next year, the customers are going to see these solutions just come ever closer, so that really you're not going to think about, am I buying Reflexis? Am I buying prescriptive analytics? Am I buying Smart Count? You can start thinking, okay, what's the problem that I want to solve? And which of these things do I weave together to optimize the workflow or make the most from the data? in the business. And then layer on our strength in machine learning, artificial intelligence, analytics. And I think this is a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense, David. And I know one of our audience, Ian, is really interested in understanding how do we get some of these technologies to work in a really sort of dense product environment, particularly around fashion, where you understand what products are in stock or on the shop floor for customers. I know some of those questions from Ian are coming in around, can cameras help? I think cameras maybe can play a part in as stock moves. I think particularly in fashion, what we've seen is that RFID, and certainly the cost of RFID, has gone down dramatically. But almost to the professor's point, the value of RFID has increased dramatically as we start to understand that data better and how it can be used. Particularly arrival at back of store, movement from back of store to front of store, and so I think that perpetual understanding of what stock do I have, and then taking that data that's sort of created from RFID, applying analytics to that we mentioned before, the sort of patterns that have been talked about by both the professor but also David with the prescriptive analytics tool. Applying those patterns to that data to see if there's things that we're either not expecting or things that we were expecting that aren't happening. So I think it's a combination of different tools. Each retail environment, as Tony mentioned before, is going to be different depending upon the mix of products that you have, fast moving, slow moving, food, non-food, fashion, etc. And also the formats of your stores. So unfortunately, there's no one simple answer to fully understanding the products available in store, even in dense retail. But I think we have all the tools in our arsenal to be able to actually help solve that problem with you, Ian. So feel free to reach out to the guys, and I'm sure we can do that. Just before we close, literally sort of 1 minute each, if you can. Final quick thoughts, if you've got them, on what do you think that retailers in our audience should be focusing on for the next 12 months when it comes to technology? I'll start with Alex, if you don't mind having some thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe I would like to hook on what I've earlier said. So I think we have seen a lot of changes within the last 12 months, which have taken place, and maybe even haven't been planned to become reality that early. And I think that only was possible because our customers were forced to do it, or even internal policies were put down in order to make it happen. And I think we all know that the world around is changing, and also the shoppers or your customers are changing too. So I think in order to stay competitive for the future, we all should be open to new processes and new technologies, as that increases your sale or employee satisfaction, or to uncover solutions for issues you even don't know aware about. So maybe to put it in Victor's words, you might get answered by these new technologies for what you don't have the question asked by now. So I think we need to be very open and try in order to get the best out of it, out of these new technologies.
Great points. David, over to you. Any final thoughts for our retail audience?
Yeah, sure. I'll keep it almost to a bit of a roadmap, Mark. So I think the first thing is infrastructure. If you want to undertake this transformation and turn your stores into what this future vision that we're painting, you've got to have the right infrastructure in place. So get the plumbing fixed to start with. Second thing, think about the technologies that you're going to invest in to help you better understand your business. So how are you going to sense the current state of your business in real time, whether it's inventory, whether it's people, whether it's activity? Then how are you going to ask the right questions of that data once you've got it? So what's your strategy for analysis and interpretation? and then how are you going to act once you've got that, and that's ultimately where the value comes. So I think if people invest in those 4 areas and have a plan based around that, it's probably going to be successful.
Perfect. Thank you, David. And Tony, anything to add from your perspective?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a lot to add. I would just say start with the problem that we're trying to solve. And there's a Jeff Bezos quote out there somewhere. Go, I don't know what's going to change, but let me tell you what's not going to change, right? Customers are going to want things at a lower cost. They're going to want them faster, and they're going to want greater selection. And the things that are going to enable that are enabled ultimately by automation, analytics, and artificial intelligence. And that's where Zebra's been investing, both internally and externally. And you're going to see more automation. It's going to drive productivity and efficiency. It's going to lower those costs. It's going to allow people to ship things in an hour or 2 hours that used to take a day or 2 days. And having that information, those insights, and turning them into actions is what's going to happen. And I think Zebra is all over this. So I think a lot of different solutions for a lot of different customers and different types of products, but it's all going to be enabled by this new wave of automation, analytics, and artificial intelligence, which is, better semiconductor chips, better communications vehicles, right? And the extension of Wi-Fi and eventually 5G, and all that stuff is happening, and Zebra's at the forefront of a lot of it.
Perfect. Thank you, Tony. And thanks to the rest of the panel as well. Some great insights, and really appreciate your time.